John Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon. It's John Summers, the motoring historian. I might need to change that intro. It's starting to annoy even me. So maybe as the listener, it's annoying you more, but not to
What are you
worry.
going to be instead?
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm brilliant, mate. I'm intrigued now. What are you going to be instead of the
Well,
motoring historian?
before we came on the line here, literally, I was listening to. Do you remember the Friday Rock Show? The only place
Tommy
you could listen
Vance.
to actual Tommy Vance, the music vendor. I thought I might just steal his jingles. And then I was like, but you're the motoring historian. But then I listened to the Saxon one, Rock with Tommy Vance. Do you remember that one? I might just
He had some cool ones, to be fair.
Now I've said it. I'm going to start this show with it. And if the BBC want to fuck me for copyright.
Is Tommy Vance still alive?
No.
Oh.
No. Really interesting guy, actually. Really worth reading up on. And a really interesting bloke. Because he was one of the original Radio 1 DJs who was like out on, like Radio Caroline when they were like the trawler floating in the North Sea. He was part of all of that. Which means that he was probably mates with Jimmy Savile and all of those kind of guys. So you wonder what went on from that kind of angle. He became Tommy Vance because he was interviewed. He was in the States, like in the 60s, in the States in the 60s. I mean, how cool must that have been? But he was interviewed by a radio station. And they were like, we'll hire you on one condition. You have to take this name, Tommy Vance, because the DJ we were going to hire was called Tommy Vance, but we fired him. He's not joining, but we've already recorded the jingles. So you just have to use his jingles and take his name. Is that okay? And Vance was like, yeah, of course. Like, you can call me whatever you like if you're going to give me a proper salary to work playing records. And yeah. So he was just open to you would put him more with John Peel, because John Peel was one of those floating around in the North Sea guys, but he was in no way wrapped up with that whole Jimmy Savile, taking advantage of young, impressionable people. The other one was Alan Freeman, and I always loved him. He would always. I remember he played Wasp's "Shoot from the Hip," which has my emotions coming down. Yeah, I mean, right, totally out of order, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I imagine at the time, I remember thinking, did he know what he knew what he was doing?
Of course he did.
And he was thinking the controllers at the BBC, are they gonna say anything? It's like,
I mean, it's actually mainstream metal, if you will call it mainstream at the time, but it was.
Yeah, it was mainstream, but that was a deep B-side cut, which Fluff had pulled out of the archive, maybe by the album. That's why I thought of it. The song is... In fact, I was talking about this with my wife the other day, was that she was saying, who's that band that every time they come on, I just know them and I hate them. They just give me a headache. And Ollie was like, Motorhead. And I was like, no, Wasp. She was like, yeah, Wasp. And I was like, weren't they the ones that you went to and then got COVID? And Dana was like, yeah, that's about right. And so, yeah, it was them that I love Wasp. And I
love Wasp as well. There's nothing wrong with Wasp.
There's a sound that they have that Blackie Lawless has, which is just so unique. And
yeah, they're excellent.
Absolutely cool. So I'm going to jump straight to a quick fire question now that I had for you. That Judas Priest or Iron Maiden?
That's a tricky one.
I mean, Judas Priest for me. I know Iron Maiden are a better live show now.
I mean, the thing with Judas Priest is if you take Judas Priest, you get about 4 bands, because Judas Priest in the 1970s is very different to Judas Priest in the 1990s. In terms of, I mean, you're comparing, like, you know, Stained Class with Painkiller, you'd be forgiven for thinking, oh, the singer sounds similar. But do you know what I mean?
That's the greatness of Judas Priest, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my mate Neil at university said exactly that. Said, like, you know, I'm not sure if it's necessarily his thing. He was like, Jesus, they changed so much. He was like, who's this band? And I was like, it's Judas Priest. And then the next album, he's like, who's this band? I'm like, dude, it's still Judas Priest. He's like, good God.
Well, that's why KK Downing's so bitter, right? Because although he didn't name and found Judas Priest, he's the only person in Judas Priest as we know them who was like in the band in the early 70s, like before Halford and Ian Tipton joined, before Ian Hill joined, right? Tipton joins in the late 80s and writes British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. So the anthemic, cheesy songs that put them, you know, that made them front and center and that was part of the new wave of British heavy metal, that was Tipton. So I didn't realize this for ages. That's why there was always this tension between Tipton and Halford.
This is future John interrupting. Of course, it's not Halford and Tipton or whatever drivel it was I was saying. Halford is the singer. Tipton and Downing had the rivalry that I'm talking about. Forgive my factual incorrectness. There's 20 minutes more of this heavy metal drivel, so you can jump forward if you want to learn about cars, or if you want to be edified by the heavy metal drivel, stay.
Now, do you remember in the album sleeve of Ram It Down, it credits the solos? And that's the pissing competition between the two guitarists, because I've never seen that done anywhere else. I don't know if they do that on the album sleeve of Painkiller. But, you know, whatever, these are artists at the peak of their form, right? And if people don't like heavy metal, they might not see it that way. But if you like heavy metal, you appreciate the fact that these are artists at the peak of their form.
And look, I mean, you get two bands with Iron Maiden, but not, you get two singers is probably a better way to put it, I guess.
They still play Iron Maiden live now,
and
it totally fits the set. Bruce Dickinson can do everything Paul Di'Anno did.
Yeah,
I'm not knocking Iron Maiden. They're like a juggernaut, right? And what you can't underestimate about Iron Maiden, and I've said this to you before, that Indian guy that my wife used to work with, who was like all about Iron Maiden, who is all about Iron Maiden, who's like, you know, dinner with Yannick Gers, that guy, right? He loves Iron Maiden because they came to India. They came. Nobody else came. And that's because nobody else figured out the money. Maiden found a way to figure out the money, because Maiden had always done it Maiden's way, hadn't they? There was no airplay, and yet they were still huge.
They found an audience, and they keep producing what our audience loves. And, you know, they've got a really interesting art style that they've managed to work for themselves as well. And, you know, they're catchy songs. You know, I mean, I've sort of checked out of buying every Iron Maiden on the basis that I feel with whatever album and volume of albums I've got, I've sort of got Iron Maiden anyway. If you like, there's additional Iron Maiden out there, and I feel good about that because I'll get to it someday. But you know, I don't have them on a lot, but I do love the stuff I've got.
I still rate them, and I saw them recently and enjoyed them, and this tour they're on at the moment with where they're, you know, nowadays you can look at the set list, right? So what I do is I look at the set list like months before the gig, and then do my best to forget it, right? Because you don't want to be like, because when I saw them, I thought they were going to play my favorite song, The Evil That Men Do. And then for some reason they didn't, just at the gig that I saw them at, right? Which normally you wouldn't have been disappointed by that. It was a great gig. But I was like, are you going to put, when's The Evil That Men Do? I know The Evil That Men Do. And then it never came. And that was disappointing. But so I'm going to do you a spoiler. But on this one, they open with Caught Somewhere in Time, and then straight into Stranger in a Strange Land. Wasted Years, the last song. the end last. So and Can I Play with Madness is in there as well, which doesn't quite fit, but is totally of the period, isn't it? It's that time where their sound,
Yeah, that's off.
where their
It's not,
sound
it?
was
But
totally
still,
in the top 40, and where they'd moved away from the rawness of the first couple of albums to this sort of synthesized, like, kind of Hawkwind space rock, kind of, Robert A. Heinlein kind of, it was they were totally in a place of their own, sort of visually and thematically, weren't they, at that point? And that's what Kana loves about them. He loves the themes and the storytelling, and I think I think that stands out. The other thing that stands out about them now is that they're so, like, Bruce Dickinson is so electrifying live, and all the other.
They always were. I mean, like, I've seen them, I don't know, 3-4 times, maybe something like that. And at big enough venues for them to have Eddie wandering around on stage and stuff, and have the Eddie version of the Sphinx. Well, you remember you were there for that one where he was behind the stage with the Eddie Gold Sphinx there, like shooting lasers out and shit.
Well, we saw him on Fear of the Dark, didn't we? We saw him at Donington and Fear of the Dark, and slept in my Cortina the night before, and it rained. Remember, it rained and the car leaked and our sleeping bags got wet. Bring it on.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's not what I remember particularly, but it was. You
remember the mosh
pit
event for Slayer? I remember that.
Yeah, definitely. It all sort of separated out.
I was going to say, I rate Fear of the Dark. I mean, and it's the song itself, and it's a staple of Iron Maiden's live show now, and I totally.
Well, everyone likes to sing along to it, don't they?
Yeah, well, I do. I'm generally not one for, like, waving the lighter in the air. I'm generally, that's not my style.
Well, you don't have to do that these days. You can hold up your mobile phone. That seems to be the thing. You turn the mobile phone torch on and hold that up instead. I saw that on a video the other day, and I thought, yeah, that makes some more sense rather than burning your fucking hands.
Yeah. So we're going to Aerosmith for my 50th. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's my second question. Aerosmith or Kiss?
Aerosmith, probably. Although I do like some Kiss.
I would actually go
Kiss.
I would go Priest and Kiss for.
I don't think I like as many albums as much as I like of Kiss, as much as I like the stuff like with Ragdoll and things like that on it.
Ollie loves that song.
Yeah. Well, he's got good taste, that lad. I mean, I always said it, but there's loads of tracks on that album that are really good. And the one with Love in an Elevator and stuff is pretty good as well.
Did I forward you that clip? That film I had of that my feed just gave me on YouTube of Slayer playing "Die by the Sword" in, like, a club in LA in 1985.
I think you mentioned it. Did you actually send a link?
Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I'll add the link for this, because just not for nothing, they always were more, right? We've talked about. I feel like I can't talk about rock and roll now without actually putting them in there, because not least, I don't want to rant about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? Because I understand why it has to be diversifying and inclusive, right? And I understand why. No way, no how can you have Slayer in there? Because Ollie was like, why don't we listen to it? And I'm like, really, Ollie? Because there's just, in every way, it's offensive. It's the lyrical content is offensive. You can't appreciate it unless it's loud and you're fully focused on it. And then I said it was discordant, and my wife was like, yeah, utterly discordant.
No, it's not utterly discordant. That's overplaying it. It is discordant in parts, but it's not.
Die by the Sword in this club in 1985. I mean, King is strong, but Hanneman's solo is just beyond. It's as if the live. It's as if he hits the notes better than in the studio with a crappy production of Show No Mercy. Because, listeners, if you weren't aware, Slayer's first album, Show No Mercy, and Metallica's first album, Kill 'Em All, both suffer from rather poor production, which blunts their enjoyment by people who weren't there when it first came along, right? I think that's fair to say.
It doesn't. I mean, you're right, because I don't know whether this is just through the prism of my having been there to listen to it the first time around, if you like, but there are several albums or bands, and I'm struggling to think of an exact example at the moment, I'm sure one will come to me, where they re-release remastered versions of the original tracks, and it's shit. There was a remastered version of Clayman by In Flames, and it's not as good. I think that's an example. Let me double check. I have to double check on that. I don't malign In Flames. I like In Flames. They're a cracking band, but
well, you can
that and it's just one of those ones where that's
still in the final cut of the pod. You have points valid, and if it's not,
exactly. It'll still be here. You'll hear it. Absolutely. Well, look, it's that sort of thing where you've got something, because the bit where he goes and screams in that track, like. And it goes into the sort of the wailing guitar in Clayman by In Flames, which, if you haven't listened to it, listeners, is a Bosting track. It's excellent. But the bit where he screams is really outstanding. And it's sort of, they overproduced it a bit. It lost some of the raggedy rawness, which diminished it for me. Maybe if I'd only heard the new version, it wouldn't have done. So I don't know, because it's still good, but it's it's that sort of thing. I listened to Megadeth. Have got some remastered versions that Mustaine has put out of some of the earlier stuff, and it's just not as good. It's like, well, I didn't need you to fix it. There was nothing wrong with it. I
think there's a difference between remixing and digitally remastering. I mean, for that album, the Megadeth album that came out when we were students, Euthanasia. That was a glossily, slickly produced record, which does better with the latest remastering. If you listen to that now, it has a clearer, it complements the sound more than doing the original recording. I don't know. I mean, until somebody pointed out to me that the recording quality of Show No Mercy was bad, I hadn't really noticed. And I was thinking about the whole thing with all of this talk about Motley Crue at the moment and backing tracks and all that kind of thing. Because I feel like when you see a band like Motley Crue, now Motley Crue particularly, Vince Neil's vocals are terrible, right? But in some ways, probably no worse than they were if you saw them at a club in the 80s where the sound system was shit. Then his voice worked. Now his voice doesn't work. But the point is that if what you're there for is the guitars, and most rock guys, the vocals are there, but the guitars are there. If you're there for the guitars, the guitar sound is better than ever because it's so well produced now. I even thought that with Wasp, right? When I saw them and got COVID, because Blackie Lawless has this back injury, so he wasn't like moving around that much. The back injury or whatever it was hadn't come out at that time, but he wasn't moving around that much on stage. And I was like, I was disappointed by the fact that the show wasn't as impressive as it was when we saw him like 15 years ago or whatever it was in, wasn't it Nottingham Rock City? We saw him out when he did the face paint.
He smeared himself with glowing goop
and climbed up on the big speaker thing, on the big mic thing that he had, and
that leant out over the audience. Yeah, it was pretty
when
cool.
I saw him in San Francisco just recently, the sound quality, bang on, the bang on, and that's really what you're there for. So, it's a weird thing how the live experience is changing as, even the live experience is digitized and produced now to a level that it didn't used to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still nice, isn't it? And it's, but yeah, no, it was just an interesting version. I mean, I think when you've listened to something hundreds of times and then someone goes back and tweaks it, even if it's to sort of polish off a smudge or a smear, you notice it and it sort of irritates you because it's jars from what you're expecting. It's like you've got, you must have the same. I've got the same thing, and you often did the tapes for me, and vice versa, where you hear the end of a track and you expect a different track to start than the one that actually starts on the next album because you didn't have it that way. And the mixtape you had at school, it went straight into like Running Wild or something like that instead. And so therefore you're like, well, hold on a second, this doesn't feel right. It should go now, and it doesn't. Like, what is this shit? And then you're like, oh yeah, this is actually the album as it was produced.
Well,
by the studio.
and so now, right, because we listen on shuffle or we listen to individual tracks, for younger people or for anybody discovering heavy metal now, you're not discovering it as the individual records come out. You're discovering it, en masse, right? So when you discover Slayer, there's not like Raining Blood 28 minutes and you're like, wow, like what on earth just happened? It's not like that. There's like a dozen albums and you can read and pick tracks and as a playlist, and you know what I mean? It's the whole discovery of music is completely different now.
It does change it up because, for band, I assume, and I don't know this, but I assume bands are still producing albums in a fashion that it will be listened to through, if you know what I mean, or whether or not they've adapted to the stage that they don't expect that. Certainly, if you look at people like Beyonce and Taylor Swift from a sort of watching the news and being informed, they certainly seem to have a holistic, sort of themes and big stage shows and stuff that all work to a whole sort of theme and stuff. I think Kanye West did one similar where he was like flying around the universe and stuff. So they have that sort of thing. So you would assume they still do it in the albums as well. But you're right. The sort of my brother, younger brother, is into his heavy metal, and I would say to him, he was, oh, I love that Ram It Down track you sent me. I'm like, cool. Yeah, it's excellent. My best solo of all time, or at least in my top 3, certainly. And I would ask him if he'd listened to the other ones on there, and he'd say, yeah, I listened to like Hard as Iron. I'm like, well, what about the other ones? And no. Because he didn't have the album. He had YouTube didn't suggest the next one, so it suggested something else. So he drifts off onto... So yeah, you don't get to experience it quite in the way that it was produced by the artist, which is odd. So
it's also there's something about the active seeking out of music, the purchasing, the going into the town centre, Plymouth town centre, the buying of the cassette, the like bringing it home and there's a whole theatre associated with it, which is just completely missing when it just like passively arrives in a playlist. It's why you appreciate that people appreciate the culture in a different way, but you don't realize at the time that you're consuming the media in that particular form. It's a really interesting
well, and it's interesting that like vinyl's coming back, and I think part of that is it's big, and I mean physically. I mean, you can get a big picture on the front. It's a ceremony, taking it out of the package and like sweeping it down and then popping it on to play. So I think there's a sort of nostalgia.
There's a sort of geeky, like, what needle have you got? Like, careful.
But also, people, I think a lot of people aspire to do scratching and stuff later on. A lot of people aspire to do scratching and stuff as well, don't they? So there's a sort of, there's that sort of kid myself that I'll learn to learn to mix as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the rise of Ollie was saying he wanted a Polaroid camera. I'm like, well, I found myself explaining to him just what a substandard technology it was, and then thinking, why are you pouring cold water on his like interesting?
Well, it's the instant production, and now they're even quicker. So it's there you are. There's a picture. You took that picture. Here it is physically. You can hand it to your mate. That's different when you aren't enabled with a phone. You don't need you sort of lose the need for that, I suppose. But at his age, I guess he's not tech food up like that.
Should we actually talk about cars for a bit?
Oh, if we must.
So we have a structure, don't we? Well,
Do we?
I mean, Yeah, I do. I did send you that agenda, and I have a slightly bigger one. And although we just digressed for the length of many podcasts, we do have so our first topic. And I've got a silly tone there, but you know, the reality is the reason I put this front and center is this partnership. I think this partnership between Ford and Tesla is enormous. I think it's the biggest news um, in the car space, probably of the year. I would say, not you know, I'm not like trying to compare news stories. I just
So it's future John interrupting again. This piece was recorded in those couple of days where Ford had made the announcement, and then it was maybe, I don't know, that was maybe the Monday, and maybe the Friday, that was when GM and Rivian on the same day made an announcement. So it's a moment in time, this particular piece, because other people came along with those announcements so soon. But I do feel like this fundamental divide that you're either with Tesla or you're not, and the points that I make in this piece remain valid. You may disagree, but whatever. You're the one listening. I'm the one talking.
and we've said on the pod before that the main reason to buy a Tesla is probably not to do with the design of the vehicle, but to do with the fact that you can, you know, be in your own special express line, you know, to get your car charged up if you're actually going outside of the range of the vehicle. Whereas, you know, the dude with the Taycan has to be in line with everybody else, which, and what they tell me is that, at least in America, you know, the Tesla one's, you know, nice and feels premium. And, you know, the charging station that, you know, Electrify America or whatever have done that you're going to be using it with your Taycan, and that every non-Tesla person is using, are completely substandard. So what I'm saying is, I feel like Ford looked at the actual nub of the problem and fixed it in a way that is going to leave guys like Toyota and Hyundai and GM out in the cold.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it makes sense. I scanned an article about it earlier on, and you know, the main point of its article was where does this leave the rest of the motoring industry, and talked a bit about the different standards of connector, one which Tesla have, and one which all the others were using, and then now Ford's abandoning to go with Tesla's one as a standard. Or
They're not. I think what they're saying is they're going to develop an adapter that allows Fords to talk to the Tesla one. So they're still in natively on the other one, but then
the article I read suggested that in future they would be building cars with the Tesla version.
Well, haven't Tesla done some full self-driving when it's actually beta self-driving? Haven't they done some, you know, overnaming where they've called their proprietary standard, they're like Microsoft Windows, they've called it like the National American Standard Connector or something like that. There's some, yeah.
They have done exactly that, yeah.
So it's a land grab. It's a land grab, isn't it? And Ford.
But you're right. I mean, the key point, I think, and I read a couple of articles about this deliberately because, you know, electric isn't necessarily my thing right now, but it's going to be, and it's going to be everyone's, and so therefore I'm keen to see the tech advance successfully, and excitingly. But you're right. The main problem, especially in the UK at the moment, is there just is not the charging capacity space for everyone. There just isn't. If we're going to stop making cars at the rate on petrol at 2030 and then transition people in over the next 10 years off, even at the rate they're doing it, it needs to accelerate like manifold. Otherwise, it's just going to be, you know, over Christmas last year, there were queues at service stations of 2 or 3 hours on specific weekends driving down to the southwest. You know, because if you're going to go down to Cornwall for Christmas, you're going to have to stop a few times from London. So, and for a reasonable amount of time. So that is not exciting. Also, I read an article by a gentleman in Wales who was driving a electric for a piece for the paper, and he said that, you know, he didn't mind some of the places he charged up, but he wouldn't want his wife charging up at those places because they were sort of out of the way and round the back and not very well lit and a bit dingy. And from my perception, or at least what I've seen, the Tesla ones tend to be a bit more front and center and well lit. And well, if you're going to buy something that, you know, your wife's going to be driving home late on her own in, and I want her around the back by the bins with a shitty fucking connection, that's not acceptable.
I don't understand what's wrong with the Volt design, right? Where it uses electric power, and when the battery's flat, it has a gas motor that powers so every now and again you have to put gas in it if you drive a longer distance. If you don't drive a longer distance, and it's completely seamless. I use it around the town. I plug it in. It never needs gas. I drive up to Napa at the weekend. I don't need to worry about whether or not it's got charge. It does 20 miles or 50 miles or 70 miles on the electric. Then it goes on to the gas, and I just drive it like a normal gas car. I mean, if I can charge it at the hotel, great. If I can't, no problem. You know what I mean? That seems to me to be the perfect solution. I have no idea why everyone only wants the plug-in. To me, that's like one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because something's going to have to shift, because it's not going to work on plan at the pace they're planning it.
So did you see the launch of the Faraday Future FF91 this week?
Couldn't they get any more Fs in that? No, I didn't.
Oh, dude. Well, the first thing is as you said about the Lucid, it's like they could have designed anything and they designed a blob. It's a bit of that. But the launch is absolutely fascinating. It is a 1 3/4 hour online extravaganza, right? You know, we've talked before and we've said, when is the Chinese skyline going to come? You know, when are they going to stop copying and borrowing other people's designs, and when are they actually going to embrace their own culture in some way, shape, or form and create something which is uniquely Chinese? This might be it. This may be it. The way that, do you remember the thing that was in the 1980s was kind of amusing about the Japanese? So they'd have these crazy acronyms for everything. Like, you know, the one I like at the moment is Acura's SH-AWD. I don't, do other people think it's SHOUD? I mean, super handling all-wheel drive, but it's ridiculous, right? They still do this a little bit. In the 80s, they used to do it an awful lot. This Faraday Future has what they call this 6x4 architecture. And it's and there's like 6 pillars and there's 4 values and they multiplied again. And it's all like absolutely, like, I watched the first half an hour of it up to when they started talking about how it had 3 5G networks available. Like, so the car has one, but then front and back seat passengers can have their own personal connectivity, completely separate from the fact that the car has all these crazy screens and all this kind of connectivity in it. They're talking about Spire marketing. I Googled it and they seem to have made that term up. There's a company called Spire, but this Spire marketing they keep talking about. And by this, I think they mean pinnacle. I think they mean that because they're talking about being better, like they are comparing themselves with Ferrari and Bugatti, if you can believe.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't see I don't see any appeal really in these fuck off great fat SUV, like heavy as balls. Like, you're still killing the planet. You're killing the planet worse. Like, you couldn't make a less eco decision if you tried. It's
I mean,
And
this Faraday has 1,050 horsepower.
yeah,
It has, and I believe them that it has all the feedback, and it drives, and I find myself thinking, the reality is that if you look at what cars are going to be like in 2035, electric cars, the best electric cars now are going to be what medium electric cars are like in other words, the cars that you and I are driving at the moment are going to feel very previous generation. And I feel like, maybe like the way that 80s cars might feel now. And I
well,
feel like as we move through the century, we're going to get to a place where, just as a 1920s car, like a 50s car, you can just about use on the road at the moment. There's issues, but you can use it. You go back to the 20s, there's far more issues. It's even more inconvenient. The lack of performance is even worse. The lack of safety makes it even more bonkers to want to do it. The technology has moved on that far. So I feel like by the middle of the century, you will be able to look back. That's by the middle of the century, these electric cars that are all able to talk to each other, which is Faraday future. It's got 3 levels of AI, right? They're saying they developed the car to have general AI capability, a personalized AI capability, and then what they assume Spire users will have, which is their own personal, secure, private AI environment. And they've developed an architecture to make all of this talk together.
I mean, look, I mean, this is Chinese, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of information to share with the Chinese government.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
let's not mess about. There's a lot of middlemen, but essentially any information you share with a Chinese company can be accessed by the Chinese government. And now, look, I'm not a US citizen, so my emails coming in and out of the US can be intercepted by the US government. So this is not an entirely parochial problem that China's dealing with. Although, let's be honest, they're doing it more effectively and more sinisterly in lots of ways. But nonetheless, it is pervasive. And a lot of that stuff's coming out with the face recognition technology being driven by standards by the Chinese government. So it's an impressive, amazing piece of kit. And the other thing you didn't mention, I had a look at the website whilst you were chatting, is their double density lithium ion batteries that allegedly push this huge Leviathan to 300 plus miles of between charges.
381, they reckon.
Yeah. Which, if that's true, is an amazing piece of kit. Although I suspect not whilst you're giving it full beans at 1,000 horsepower down the drag strip. But nonetheless, who knows?
No, so this week, I sat in a Tesla Plaid, and the guy that was showing it to us works for Tesla, and one of the students in the group was like, said to me, "What did I think of what did I think of it?" And the Tesla guy made eye contact with me and was like, "I bet he doesn't think it's really a car." And I was like, you know what? Absolutely. Because when Teslas first came along, they felt like they were so next generational. They felt like something different from what had gone before. And I feel like this Faraday, the Lucid and now the Faraday, the futuristic blob with the mega technology that can do, the Faraday guys, they talk about it being 3 kinds of car, right? They talk about it being an SUV, a hypercar, and a sedan. It's that whole, this whole conception of a product is not as I've understood cars to be, and not how people living in the 20th century understood cars to be. So there's a sort of the other thing they said, right, and I do think this is interesting, is they said we've lived through the age of the hardware defined car and through the age of the software defined car. We feel we are now entering the age of the AI defined car.
I mean, that's just bullshit. AIs are not that developed.
If you watch the launch, one of the most astonishing things about it is there's a sort of Elon Musk and DeSantis on Twitter kind of gaps between the different presentations they do. And the language in the captions and the language that the people use is not quite the same.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong. I mean, it depends what you plug in and how you plug it in.
With 400 miles range, who gives a fuck, right? Nobody's driving that thing 400 miles, right? Anybody wealthy enough to buy that thing is going to fly if it's over 200 miles. They're not going to sit in the car for all that time, right? So that range is the only way that range becomes an issue is if, our friends in LA, Santa Monica to Santa Barbara, drive the thing around. If you know facilities to charge at the house in Santa Barbara because it's a rental house. So unless you remember to charge it at the country club that you're a member at, you have to be a bit careful because you might not have enough charge to get back to Santa Monica. Well, that's what a 400-mile range does for you. A 200-mile range, you need to charge it every time you're using it. It just puts you in a totally different kind of frame of mind. But no, I'm totally with you that these great big heavy fat things, they remind me of the way that cars were before the Model T, that you could only really make money making luxury cars. So everybody made and famously, Ford's board didn't want him to make the Model T. They wanted to make him to make the Model K, which was a luxury model that they knew they could make money on. And so I feel like we're at early doors at the moment where but there's I just feel like what was fascinating about Faraday is that the company are a total startup who are I've not driven the car. I'm not a Spire buyer, so I have no idea how the comparison process of a wealthy oil scion in the Middle East. I don't know how he's going to compare this with the AMG Benz or the Ferrari or the Bugatti or whatever else he was. I have no idea what his comparison reference point is. It's just
it's some of the questions that spring to beg to be asked. There's no point in asking. It's like why has it got 1,080 horsepower? Because is the answer to that. Because if you're having an all singing, all dancing hotel room on wheels that does everything for you, then when you get the opportunity to show off to the other sheik's son, you want to be able to blow his other whatever he's got off the track when you blast down, for the once in a lifetime when you give it a squirt. So have all the horsepower. And I mean that sort of rocket ship performance is exciting. There's little arguing with that. But I was thinking about what it is it feels like the wrong direction to me just because it's so heavy. And when I think about the most pure driving enjoyment you get, it's almost always from stuff like Caterhams, which couldn't be more at the opposite end of the scale in terms of less technology and add enormous amounts of lightness. But then most people aren't looking for that. Most people would just want transportation.
And that's the thing about bikes, isn't it? The reason that bikes are so much fun is the shittiest motorcycle delivers better feedback than just about the best car I've ever driven.
Yeah,
it's a different experience, but
it is. You're on
fundamentally
it, that makes it a big difference. Being hit by the wind and the flies makes a huge difference. And it
But
takes a while when
even-
you haven't been on a bike to get used to the floor being just there. The floor's always just there. It's just usually there's a door in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that. I was thinking about how in a lot of cars, if you really think about where you sit very close to the front wheel.
Hmm.
You know, you almost sit on top of the front wheel. You know why I was thinking about it? I was thinking about it because of the way that certain vans had that cab over design years ago. You know, vans like the first generation Econoline, but because basically there was the headlight bucket and then the pedal box and your feet. So, you know, there was like that's why later Econolines have that little nose on them, is just to have a little bit of crumple zone so that you're less likely to be injured in even a small fender bender. And of course, vans like European vans like the Morris J9 or the Citroen H van, they put you even you know, closer to the front. So in the first blog we talked about 44 Teeth, the YouTube channel that we both enjoy, and we talked about their correspondent Mike Booth. He had that unsuccessful trip to the TT last year when sponsored by us. We should say we sponsored him as part of our fantasy literary venture, the Chronicles of Halvar and Clarence. So we had halvarandclarence.com on his helmet, and then felt bad when he fell off and injured himself pretty badly. But even with one leg, Mark, he is back at the TT this week. Did you see that?
I haven't seen the video, but I saw him. I watched one of the videos where Al was racing that BMW thing as one of the warm-up races at the BSB paddock stuff. I think it's a BSB. Either way, they're racing these BMW one make series. And he was having a cracking time, and Boothie was like legging up and down the pit lane, carrying tire warmers and rims and other bits and bobs because it was sort of wet, dry race, and like looking extremely sprightly. And I was delighted to see it.
Yeah, it's. This is why I wanted to raise the topic on the pod, just to round out the story.
Yeah,
what a geezer. Yeah, and of course we know that this stuff, you know, it's not just because he seems chipper. That doesn't mean it's fixed. Yeah, just because he seems chipper, that doesn't mean that it's fixed. But we can say that you know, yeah, it's just good to see him in good spirits. On the theme of the TT, of a couple of other things. Should we do the happy news first or the sad remembrance first? Which do you want?
Go on, let's do the happy news first.
Peter Hickman's 133-mile-an-hour lap.
That boy's on fire.
Photograph on Twitter of Michael Dunlop at Hilbury with the wheel right against the curb, like using the full width of the road. But you know, the runoff, there being no runoff, the runoff being a curb with a drain and a double yellow line.
Yeah, heroes, a lot of them.
20 years since Dave Jeffries was killed. 20 years.
Yeah, man.
Which is astonishing. It's a reminder of your own mortality, that in that 20 years you and I have gone from being, you know, considering ourselves young, even though we weren't, to being like, wow, we're now not young anymore. So it's a remarkable transition. And we remember Dave Jeffries. Here's why I want to remember him, right? Because those bikes were heavy bastards. They were fast, and the way that they rode them, they made about as, you know, they were about as fast as modern bikes. Yeah, sure, down about 50 horsepower on modern bikes, but they were pretty much as fast as modern bikes, but heavier, with not so good brakes, not so good tires. The whole piece was different. And it always struck me about Dave Jeffries that he was good because he was a big guy, and instead of that like hurting him with the aero, it helped him actually muscle the bike into the corners and made him faster.
he was just faster. And I think it was you. I can't remember who it was. It may probably you that told me that because he was a big lad, he didn't do so well or get proper rides on the short circuit stuff so much, and therefore always seemed to put in a bit of extra, 110% kind of cheese on the TT to sort of re-establish and show how quick he was. And boy, did he. He was awesome to behold.
Yeah. So 20 years since the passing of Dave Jeffries. So nominally, we were going to talk about your visit to France and the Pau Grand Prix. So give me the what was it your sales manager used to call the 7 soldiers: the who, why, what, when, how. Give me the SP.
Yeah. So it's Pau, as I was informed by the lady whose house we stayed at last time I was down there, when I was calling it Pau, or Pau, or whatever I was calling it. But yeah, it's quite a little town.
Pau is like something Batman would do,
exactly,
isn't it?
And that's what she told me off for calling it. It's Pau, rather than Pau. But it's a charming little town, just on the river, down in just north of the Pyrenees, southern France, about 2.5 hours southeast of Bordeaux. We flew in there and then drove down and got a little fiesta. Yeah, and when we stayed there last year, just to like be in the area and check it out, and do some of the mountain passes, which are really beautiful. And there's some cracking roads if you go down there towards Spain. But yeah, we stayed there, and they mentioned that there was this Pau GP sort of race, and they do over 2 weekends. They do sort of modernish stuff, and then they do the Pau Historics, which we're going to see. And it's about a 1.5 mile circuit around the town centre, reasonably twisty. But because it is street circuits, it's the classic Monaco stuff. So if you book your hotel early enough, and we booked a nice hotel on the corner just above the chicane, you can basically rent a room with a balcony where you can sit out on the balcony all day and watch motorsport. And I highly recommend it. On the Saturday morning, we arrived on the Friday night. There was qualifying. There was sort of there was racing, or at least qualifying, as practice on the Friday as well, but which we missed. But Saturday morning at about 8 o'clock or 7:45, I was woken up by the sound of like V8s and V60s like roaring past just outside the window down a couple of floors, which was awesome. So
it's like that scene in Le Mans, like that scene in John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix, where Jessica Walters is in bed with a hangover, and the race is going on outside the window, and she's like, I hate the noise.
Yeah. Although I was loving the noise.
I never thought of the sheer convenience of one's grandstand being.
Oh, dude, it is so
on the side of one's room, of one not needing to get dressed, of one being able to sip one's coffee whilst.
It is the best. So I will look up the hotel, because they were very nice, and it's essentially if you imagine the track like a clock face, we were at about 1 o'clock, 1:30, around there, and it comes around the outside of a park on the edge of town, here we go. It's a clockwise circuit. And we stayed in the Parc Beaumont Hotel, which is just on the outside of the track. So you rent in advance. It's not the cheapest, because it's a 5-star hotel. I wouldn't usually stay in that sort of thing, but I think including breakfast for 3 nights, it was like €900 for a room with a balcony overlooking the track. So we sat outside. I don't know whether we were the last to book, because all of the balconies had sort of floors above with the balconies over them, so they had a bit of a roof, whereas ours didn't. It was sort of on the end, so it was just open. But most of the time it was lovely and sunny, so we just sat out there with the shades on, took the stuff out of the minibar fridge and loaded it up with beers from the local Carrefour, and sat out there in the afternoon having a little cold one, watching the cars zoom by. Excellent way to spend a couple of days.
Dude, that sounds pretty bucolic. I would go so
Oh,
far
I
as to
would
say.
recommend it.
Actually, I purposely, I know you'd been, but I purposely hadn't like engaged with the whole thing until we talk now. And the standout for me, I really hadn't grasped the convenience of your bedroom and the loo right there, and then the balcony right there, and your like mini bar with the beers in. That's an elevated.
Dude, I
An
mean, the
elevated
other thing
experience
is
like
about it, it's a 5-star hotel, yeah? So the restaurant downstairs, there's Le Jeu de Paume, which is a little restaurant that we looked up. I was looking out the window and I was watching the cars go past, and down to your right on the first evening, I was looking through, and it's the classic sort of stone French building, big shutters, and of course, it's the end of a beautiful day. The shutters are all thrown open. It's a restaurant, so there's like trestle tables in there, and you can see people like holding forth and drinking their bottles of wine, having a lovely time in there. Well, that restaurant runs the restaurant in the hotel as well. So on the Sunday night, it was booked for the Saturday night, but they do, because it's a 5-star hotel. There's room service up until midnight. So we arrived on the Friday night, and I ordered a burger and chips up to the room, and a bottle of wine, and so they do like, I think I had a nice pasta on the Saturday. You don't need to leave the room. You just have amazing food delivered to you all day. And breakfast is included downstairs. So you can go downstairs, wander outside and stand by the pond where all the grenouilles, the little frogs, that later on in the evening, you think, what the fuck is all that racket? It's the frogs. They are going for it down there, having their springtime shenanigans and letting the world know. There's all these frog chorus the whole evening. But, up until about, I think, 9:30 on the Saturday night, there were still cars thrashing around. At one point on the Sunday, I wandered off to the Carrefour to get some bread and cheese and a bottle of Badwa and some wine to sit on the balcony and eat that for lunch. Again, don't overcomplicate these things. French bread and cheese with a bottle of wine on the balcony, as Clotaire would have us do it, is the way to do it. Don't fuck about. Just have it awesome. And I was walking along, and that guy parked up next to me as I was carrying the rucksack with the stuff back from the thing. And I was like, oh, wow, an original Alfa GTV. Like, that's a nice car. Really red, like, really nice, like, proper Alfa GTV. And then behind him, I was like, hold on a second, have I stumbled on something? The next car was like a 430. The next car was a 488. The next car was I think there was a McLaren. Then there was about 9 Porsches in a row of like 911s. There was because I thought, hold on, there was a white Carrera GT4, then there was a white 911 GT3, and then a whole bunch of different Boxsters and stuff as well. And turns out when I got back up to the room, they were doing laps of the track. So it was a big sort of queue of people who'd obviously I didn't know if you have to book or have a certain amount of cars, but I think you have to have a certain period of car, a notable car, and you have to register in advance. But if you do so, you can go and drive the track. So on the Sunday, they were had a half an hour where these punters were taking their pride and joy around the track that they just watch people thrashing about. So it's I think it's like 40 euros for the day for paddock access, and you can sit in any stands. And the stands weren't particularly busy. On the Sunday for the big races in the afternoon, the stands were that I could see were moderately full, but most of the rest of the time, because there's so much of it, it wasn't all that busy. So we didn't get, unfortunately, annoyingly, obviously, partly because Angie's struggling with mobility at the moment until the operation, but we didn't get out and about too much. And I didn't want. I could have gone over on my own. She was more than happy for me to get to it, saying I should, but I didn't want to leave her. We're only down there for the weekend. I want to leave her for like 4 hours while I wander off to the other side of town to look at cars on my own. So, and I would, at the end of the day, they drove more past the window. It's quite easy to be passive when they're delivering you your auto porn about 50 feet below you. So, and yeah, just being able to sit there and watch it. I mean, next year I'll take a better camera and the tripod in the luggage, and then I'll be able to set up and do like really cool video, and I'll get a slightly different rooms. I get a better view of the chicane because there was a tree in the way. But yeah, you're nitpicking. I only booked it like 3 months before the event, and I still got a balcony overlooking the track. The people in the hotel were absolutely lovely, really charming. When we arrived, there was no parking spaces except the disabled space, so I just parked in it, went in and told them, and the guy went, yeah, "It's fine." I was like, "Well, there's no other spaces now, and there's no disabled space." He went, "It's fine." That was the end of that. So no problem. It's like when I'd parked in Italy and I asked if there was a hotel parking space, and they said, yeah, definitely. And then I got there was about 20 spaces, and I think there was at least 20 people in the hotel. So we did get one, but I ended up parking underneath the hotel in what looked like the sort of actual owner's place, just rammed in against the walls, hoping that he could get out. And when I told one of the ladies who worked there, she just shrugged and went, "Is it on the hotel grounds?" I said, "Yeah." She went, and then walked off. So they were all pretty tranquil and continental about that whole thing. So yeah, I mean, it was a little bit expensive, but for the access you got, you can't knock it. It really is your sort of mini Monaco experience.
So, bunch of different races. I had a look at the timetable, and we'll put a link in for that. From your perch on the balcony, looking down from on high, did His Majesty have any cars that he would have been particularly interested in taking home or driving, or just that he would like to offer comment on?
I mean, I would have taken home probably half the 911 field. The Porsche field would have probably, my garage would have gone from none to lots pretty quickly. I liked the AC Cobra. I think it was a 275 that was in that field. I rather liked as well. There were several of the cars milling around the place. I would have taken it. I mean, it was really an eclectic event, and you know the little I don't even know what they were. That little one make series of cars that I sent you, the ones of them like hustling it around. The ones that look like something out a sort of mini version of something out of the Anthill Mob kind of ones. Those little ones with the sort of
Legends, where it's like yeah, I know those, where it's like a midget, like a modern midget racing series. Tony Jardine has one. Yeah.
Well, either way, those things that they were rinsing them, and plenty of like opportunity to see them like slithering around the S-Bends outside. That looked like a cracking entertainment. And it's one of those ones where, again, I was looking in the classifieds afterwards, and you don't have to look very hard in the back of a copy of Motorsport to be finding cars you could pick up for less than a ridiculous amount. So 20-30 grand for a car that is pre-Goodwood qualified or pre-Po qualified or Porsche historic Class E certified and stuff. So these sort of things are available to people if you can go out and do this and sort of get yourself through the eligibility requirements and stuff. So I don't know whether that's actually feasible, but I like the idea of it. So it sort of retains a sort of an attainable sort of distant perhaps, but participatory sort of nature that might be something that one can explore. So I don't know, it's unlikely, but you never know how these things pan out. It's not a ridiculous amount of money to get in, and it's sort of I like the racing. It was the whole thing has a sort of really sort of warm and friendly kind of feel. But again, as I said, the lady that we spoke to that we stayed with last year, she said that this town sort of split. Some people are interested, some people are just annoyed that it limits access around the town centre and is noisy as fuck for about a week and a half. And they have to sort of go around building up the barriers and putting stands in place for like months beforehand. So, I can understand why that'd irritate you.
I do a conference with a Belgian academic, and he made the point that obviously academia is a fairly left-leaning kind of environment anyway, and maybe his point was maybe Belgium's a left-leaning country, but the attitude of other Belgians to automobiles is, he said, it's best compared to smoking. So in other words, it's something that was once socially acceptable but is now not socially acceptable, is positively and is looked on as harmful, and how the people and if you're somebody who is still a smoker, you're willfully damaging the environment of the people around you. And people wonder at the mindset, and he rounded out the conversation, and I'll never forget this, by saying, so that's why my mum and dad live in Scotland, and my dad has a stick shift 5-litre Mustang, a new GT. And that was.
I mean, I've been to Belgium. I've been through Belgium on several occasions. I've been aiming to go to Belgium once with you and Chris, and we milled around Belgium town centre for a bit and decided that we were better off renting a car and going to Amsterdam.
Yeah, Brussels was boring, wasn't it? There were the cows.
Boring, yeah.
There were the cows. Even the naked ladies' place wasn't very good. We were still of an age where we went to naked ladies' places, weren't we? And even that wasn't very good.
No, we were better off renting that Ford Ka and sleeping in it, 3 of us.
Yeah, I can't believe we did that. I was watching one of the YouTube channels that I watch, and there was like a car show, and there was a Ford Ka or car or however you say it, still don't know. And I'm like looking inside it and thinking, yeah, it's roomy inside, but roomier than you'd expect from the outside, but roomy enough for 3 men. But we did manage it, didn't we? Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that was why we didn't have the energy for the naked ladies, or Mark.
Remember where we parked it? Like someone nicked the aerial off the top of the car as well.
I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah. We parked it on the outskirts of Amsterdam, didn't we? We did the John Summers patented street park. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And it was, apart from the fact that someone nicked the aerial. But the rental company didn't notice when we gave it back, so that was all right.
So there is a really famous motor racing history story in which if I'd have been prepared, I'd have read up on it so I could give you the full song and dance. But Pau is the only place where the Silver Arrows, the original Nazi era Silver Arrows, were ever beaten. This is the story. So you might say, well, were they dominant? So what period is this? This is 34 to 39, and at this time, Pau is a non-championship race that occurs early in the year. So this one particular year, Auto Union choose not to go. Mercedes-Benz send 2 cars. I think the story is one car was binned in practice. The other car was not geared for Pau. It was geared for Spa, well, it wouldn't have been Spa, would it? Because that always came late in the year, but it was geared for like the first race of the season. It might have even been Tripoli, the Malhalla circuit, and I just want to say I've rambled onto this, but this is why I do this pod, so that I ramble onto these things. I'm just going to ask you now, when I'll add some pictures, is Google up some pictures of the Tripoli Grand Prix circuit. And specifically, the circuit was called Melhalla, Melhalla. It was all like fast sweeping turns. In period, it was faster than Spa as it was, faster than Nürburgring, faster than Monza. I mean, it was like all Mussolini's like continental, Mussolini's imperial ambitions. So it had these wonderful pits and palm trees and sweeping turns, and it was meant to be this showcase where people could come and see how marvelous the Italian Empire was. Really an interesting piece. So anyway, so my understanding is the car was geared for that track, or was geared for another track. Anyway, this is the story, and it's all wrapped up with, and I can't remember how, and this is why I should have done some reading around it. But have you heard of this? The million franc prize. Have you heard of this before? You're not.
I heard of it, yeah.
I mean, this big deal in the 1930s where the French government put up $1 million for anybody who could beat the Germans. So the first thing they did was have these speed trials at Montlhéry, the bank track just outside Paris. And or the different French manufacturers went and competed. And then one manufacturer, I can't remember who, the whole story of the winning of the $1 million franc prize is better than the story I'm going to tell. but I forgot that one a lot. It was a race, and the guy who won, it was, it was a race to the race, and then in the race, the guy that was going to win didn't win, and it was all super dramatic. Anyway, the winner of the £1 million prize was this, I think it was a Delahaye, that was kind of a sports car, and anyway, this one day in Po, this Delahaye, driven by a French bloke who later opens a restaurant in New York and is a good raconteur and storyteller, Dreyfus, I think his name was, beats the Silver Arrow, beats the Nazis. And I think the really interesting thing about the story, for me, the interesting thing about the story was the way in which the Mercedes factory version is all about, the car having the wrong gearing and whoever it was binning it in practice, whereas the French version is this sort of patriotic kind of, and the story has sort of gained. I guess I first encountered the story when I encountered that collector, Peter Mullin, and was doing that work for his museum, because part of that work was looking at each of the cars and understanding the story of each of the cars. And if this beating the Silver Arrow story was really true, then that made that car worth talking about a lot more than the others. But I just I suppose maybe I did remember the story quite well. I've remembered the story reasonably well. I've probably, you know what,
it's Mellaha, by the way, Mellaha. I looked it up.
Thank you.
I'm only saying that for the listener.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, these pods are riddled with this kind of factual incorrectness, right?
Yeah.
And this is because it's meant to feel like a conversation, right?
Yeah, we're old farts remembering.
I could go back and I could edit out the facts. I could edit out all the bits where I'm wrong, but then it wouldn't be natural anymore, would it? Right? So what's unnatural is you listening to it maybe 15, 20, 100 years after we're saying this. What's unnatural is you holding me to some factually correct standards. The internet can do that for you, right? Can't it? Yeah,
it's just literally for someone who might have looked it up on that spelling. I thought, well, I looked it up on the spelling, but as you say, the Googs is there in the background delivering the goods for you without you having to respell it. So it's it doesn't really matter.
So look up the Tripoli Grand Prix, and it's exciting.
Yeah, it looks pretty impressive. It's I can see why it was fast.
Yeah, and this is the value add that I'm. How about this? Old Herman Lang raced motorcycles in the 1920s. Then the Weimar Republic collapsed. He had no money. He didn't know, struggled around, didn't know what to do. Took an apprenticeship at Daimler-Benz. Happens to be he was Fagioli's chief mechanic. He was that good a mechanic that he was Fagioli's chief mechanic. And the story is that they're testing at Monza, and on the train back from Monza, one of the Mercedes-Benz designers is in the same carriage, and there's banter between Lang and another mechanic who had also been a motorcycle racer in the 1920s about some oil that had been borrowed and never returned. So they're bantering backwards and forwards. Oh, did you know that Lang used to race? Yeah, I didn't know that Lang used to race, says the driver. Oh, it says the designer. Oh, says the other mechanic, like he was really good. He won everything, which he did, right? He had like a super dominant period that was completely derailed by what happened to the economy and the fact that he wasn't like rich or well connected in the way that, say, von Brauchitsch was to be able to, to jockey. Lost my train of thought. Remind me.
We were talking about the Tripoli Grand Prix, and then you went on to talking about Herman
Lang. I was talking about the greatness of Lang, and I was in the railway carriage on the way back from Monza, wasn't I, where the designer and so it comes out that Lang has this incredible history of motorcycle racing. So from that point on, the designer works to overcome the fact that Lang is working class and a mechanic to give him a chance to drive the cars. And of course, Lang So literally, Lang goes from having never raced, he's never raced in any other series before, and he first becomes a team driver in 1937. That Grand Prix car, that Mercedes Grand Prix car, was more powerful than any Grand Prix car until the Renault turbo cars of the late 70s. Right, 646 horses, the stat. I think it depended what fuel and whether you had the carbs right and all of that. But more than 500 horsepower, we can comfortably say on that circuit, on that Tripoli Grand Prix circuit. These are epic stories, and this is what I want to draw attention to, and this is what I would have wanted to do were I at the Pau circuit, was have a sense of, I mean, is this story about the gearing? Is it a slow circuit? I feel like you could. It is. It's a twist.
Yeah, I mean, there is a straight, but like the bit around our place, it was reasonably curvy and stuff. So it's not a massively long circuit. I think I said 1.5. It might even be like something like 1.2 miles. It's not hugely long, but it's a pretty circuit. I mean, it's kind of cool. It goes down along the front, along the river, and then doubles back, and then comes up towards the sort of go round the big loop round the park, and then through some chicanes and stuff. It's a cool little circuit. I would like to give it, thrash a car around there myself. But no, I can see how if you were geared for, because that circuit looks a bit like that Go circuit that we went to up at Reims, or Reims as we would pronounce it, I suppose, but the French wouldn't. Where they were racing their sports cars in the 50s and stuff, and I mean it was fast. It's a big, wide, curved circuit.
Reims is your classic three towns triangle, which was a classic of it's a feature of French and Italian road race circuits. It's a feature of Irish road race circuits. The motorcycle stuff that we talk about, them having those insurance problems, those are often three villages that are joined together. But you're right, Reims is fast and open. It curves in places, and there are those sharp turns. But it was different from I think different from Pau, which Pau is more twisty than.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a street circuit, so it feels different. It's I mean, Reims goes through the villages, but it's it's not. It's not the same. This is like quite tight and twisty in places.
So I'm going to change gears completely now. Banger racing. Loved it as a boy. Loved it. Realised the other day that there's these series for like pre-90s bangers. Right. So in other words, cars which are now considered collectible, being, banger race to destruction. There's even competition between, banger races. And this has gone on for a long time. And of course, the classic car guys have always cried about the banger racing guys smashing the cars up, and the banger racing guys are like, well, if you loved it that much, you should have restored it. Like, if it's not worth any money, what's wrong with us just racing it and smashing it up? The ethics of banger racing, where do you stand? Do you give a shit? You could just say no, and then I just have to edit out this whole topic, wouldn't I?
I suppose I'd not considered it quite like that before, but my immediate, off the top of my head, take would be somewhat more towards the banger racing-y kind of guys' perspective, on the basis that, a lot of the cars you see banger racing, I wouldn't save, and even if they were good examples, I wouldn't be that interested in saving them. So more often than not, it's just dross that was about, that would either be propping up other cars in a junkyard, or is out there being raced and kept going to race week by week by enthusiasts to, cut their teeth smashing around him. And if it makes them happy, then I don't care. I think it's fair enough, and it's quite good fun to watch. My big problem with banger racing, from a purist point of view, is it's not really proper racing in a lot of ways. The banging takes a bit more precedence than I might have liked in terms of actually racing. I'd rather go-karting or something like that and actually be as quick as it can be, rather than worrying about someone T-boning me out of left field for the lols.
I feel like that. It's got. I don't mind a bit of contact.
No, yeah.
But I feel that I don't mind a bit of contact, but where contact is the main thing, that seems not much of a sport. I agree. There's more banger than racing. That bothers me. What really bothers me is that I just believe it's not cool to be destructive like that. Like it just feels inherently wrong to be destructive. So I could give you an argument that all those Cortinas and Granadas that you and I saw chewed up on the banger tracks of southern England in the 90s, like all of them would be worth more money now. Well, yeah, they would be worth more money now, and more Ford guys would go to Ford events, and there would be the sea of surviving Cortinas and Granadas would be bigger. And you might say, well, kind of it was fine in the 90s, we didn't really lose that much. I don't know. I just feel like you can't save everything, right? And I feel like when today's generation has gone, the Granadas and Cortinas that have survived, is there going to be another generation that cares about them and wants to preserve them? I'm not sure. So I see your
point. If they become more like PCs, they become more disposable in the sense that they lose character. But then I guess the people who are used to their devices turning on and being super reliable, like a PC, would say, I'll lose your character and accept flawless reliability, 5.9's reliability instead. Thanks. So I don't know, but maybe character's another word for unreliability. But it feels like the less you have to interact with it, the more it's like a program where you get in and say, take me here. Inevitably, it loses some of its charm because you have to engage less. So therefore, there's less of an emotional attachment to them, I suppose.
All right. Quick fire. F40 or 959?
F40.
Me too. F40 or F50?
Well, that's an interesting question. Evo did a reprise of their original review of the F50 and said that actually, on reflection, it was a much, much better car than they gave it any credit for in the day. And that nowadays, on good rubber, it's an amazing piece of work. Full on sort of F1 car for the road as it was built with that engine and all that sort of stuff. But I'd probably still take the F40.
No, I'd take the F50.
I'd be interested to drive it just because of the engine. You know what I mean?
Even at the time when people were like, it was a bit fat and heavy and all of that, I still...
It's still a stick though, isn't it?
It's a stick with a Formula One.
Yeah, I'd take the F50. I made a muppet.
Also, part of what people didn't like was it developed. I think it was partially developed by Michael Schumacher. So it has that Michael Schumacher really sharp turn-in, which a lot of people don't like. So
yeah, no, I would take the F50.
R32 or Focus RS?
Which Focus RS?
The contemporary one.
No, I'd probably take the Skyline line.
Oh no, I mean Golf R32. It's like hot hatch, fight of the hot hatches. Yeah, that's confusing, isn't it? All these letters and numbers.
Yeah. I'm not that asked about either of them, to be honest. I mean, I'd probably take the Ford on the basis that it's if it's the last one they did, it's the 4-wheel drive 350 sort of brake horsepower Banzai one. But the looks of them were a little bit unhappy, and I don't like paddle shifts, and they both are.
Are they? There's not a manual box in the Focus RS?
I don't think so. The Golf definitely isn't.
Yeah. Well, I would have the Ford.
I think you can get the Golf Club Sport in with a stick shift, but that's the lighter version and not the 4-wheel drive one.
911. 911 GT2 or 488 Challenge, whatever the like racy
The
middleweight.
488, isn't it like the Pista, I think?
Yeah, whatever that is.
That.
You take that over the GT2.
I wouldn't. The GT2 isn't the one I would choose. If I was taking a 911, I'd have the R.
I know you'd have a GT3 Touring, and so would I.
Well, no, I'd have the R if I could get one, but they're like rocking horse shit. You ain't getting one of those. I think they're now commanding about a 200 grand premium on what they were when they came out, and that happened within about 6 months. But it's essentially a souped up version. Well, it's the GT3, but with a stripped out version and sort of street package and a stick shift. So it's essentially a 911 Touring in all but name. Well, it's a different version, and I would have that one first if I could. But I still think all the reviews I've seen of Ferrari over the last 10, 15 years is when you're getting the 430 Scuderia or the 488 Pista or even the 360 Challenge Stradale, those special editions are gobsmacking. And although I would want the 911 probably more often, I think for the occasions when you could use the Ferrari, it would just be biblical. So,
if you could have only one, would it be manual transmission or rear wheel drive?
Manual transmission.
You can historic race any car anywhere. What and where?
Crikey. I'd like to. I mean, I it's difficult to say that you wouldn't want to do the original Mille Miglia in the 50s in something, just because it's such a big race. You know, the sort of the scale of it is appealing.
We talked some years ago about, in fact, Mark Newton, who we had on the last pod there, found a road race prepared Ford Capri. This was like a Mercury Capri, but it had been built in Southern California, basically to like Ford Cologne, Ford like Capri RS 2600 kind of specification. He found that car just quite recently and was so that car, that was, I mean, the asking on it was like $60,000. So, you know, not in my league at all, but a beautifully prepared Capri like that at Spa. That's what jumps into my mind. I'd rather have a Capri Mark III, actually, now I think about it, than a Mark I. I'd like as I stop and think about it, I'd do a Spice Capri, because I feel comfortable in a car that's that kind of size and has got that amount of power. You know, that's really where I've been at recently is I guess with all the sports bikes that I've got, there's many machines that I have where there's an ocean of performance that I can't explore properly. I'm interested. The vision would be something that I would feel like a Capri. I feel on top of that, I could attack Spa properly with a machine that I felt that on top of.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, Spa is just about my favorite track in the world that I've driven. I can't think of anything I've enjoyed more. It's difficult to argue with that.
It's we were talking about this. I was talking about this with my class, and they were saying how fabulous, you know, the Nürburgring must be, and I took the wind out of everybody's sails by saying, you know, it's about my fear is the fallen biker, you know, is coming around the corner and coming upon a bike who's lying on the track. And I know you and I have talked about that before. With Spa, because it's the racetrack, not the closed road. And the other thing to say about it is it's the sheer speed in comparison to British club circuits or the sort of technical inner bowl circuits that we have here, like Thunder Hill or Sears Point or Button Willow or Laguna Seca. All of these have, they're like modern facilities. They don't have the kind of, 5 turns with exit speeds of more than 120 miles an hour in a Fiesta ST. That's the like.
Yeah, it's amazingly fast, but yeah, no, and it's iconic as well, isn't it? But yeah, no, it's that one is hard to turn out.
Mark, we've come to a natural conclusion. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Cool.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.